continuing on. And by the way, just as a reminder, folks, Super Chat is right here. People have been leaving contributions, and people have also left GoFundMe. So we're trying to get to over $5,000 by the end of this, even if I have to go while the lights go out and I have no more breath. We're going to keep going. You go to the next one. Okay, so this one was really, really disturbing, and I had never heard of it. It doesn't surprise me, but I had never heard of it, and I doubt most people have. So this comes from projectcensored.org, which is actually great because every year they do a series of 25 underreported stories. So this one in particular, MIT Energy Initiative, almost entirely funded by oil and gas companies. So let that sink in. The very people, MIT, super smart school, super dedicated students and professors, they're being funded by fossil fuel companies. I mean, I just can't. So The Guardian reported, without the public's awareness, fossil fuel interests representing oil, gas, and coal companies, as well as utilities and investors, have colonized nearly every nook and cranny of energy and climate policy research in American universities. So when we see those studies come out telling us things, can we trust them? It seems like we cannot. And this comes from two researchers at Stanford University and MIT. Oh, Eric donated to the campaign. Thank you, Eric. We'll get to you in just a second. It goes on to say that fossil fuel interests dominate energy and climate policy research at a lot of places, not just MIT. This includes Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Harvard,
and the University of California, Berkeley. And so that, you know, Berkeley is known for being super crunchy, super hippie, super like into climate change in the earth and things like that. So, I mean, what's going on here? So the result is more than a conflict of interest, Franta and Supran reported. Those are the ones who are doing this piece at projectcensored.org. These are industry projects with the appearance of neutrality and credibility given by academia. They also noted that the fossil fuel industry often employs a tactic of claiming to promote a rational middle. So they're not all going rah-rah for themselves. They're doing the rational middle, kind of like the centrists do in other ways. Kind of like
Jake Tapper, your hero on CNN.
He's not my hero. I just think he's very nice and has a good heart. And he's cute.
Oh, God.
So they do the rational middle between total dependence and on renewable energy and total independence from fossil fuels. So corporate news coverage of how the fossil fuel industry has captured energy and climate policy research at universities basically doesn't even exist. So I doubt you've heard this before, and this should be everywhere. This news should be blasted from the mountaintops. It's disgusting.
And by the way, I just want to make a point because it's important to point out the corporate media too. And I'm going to get to the people who just contributed via GoFundMe as a quick update. Wow, we're already almost about to pass 4,000.
Yay!
So I think like 8 or 9 people have already contributed during our live stream. It's not so far off. We could do 1,000 by the end of the day, I think.
I think so.
I think so.
Definitely.
Keep it coming, and we'll, yeah, they can. When you move to this. Yeah. So almost at 4,000. But I want to make a point. Whether it's MIT, whether it's Harvard, all these places, guess what? Guess what? Corporate media is also.
Who said Jake Tapper isn't cute? No.
It's corporate media is also funded by these oil and fossil fuel companies. When you see CNN, Jake Tapper be like, well, you know, the activists say this and the fossil fuel companies say this, and I don't know. Well, then you have CNN taking money from the American Petroleum Institute. Or you have places like Politico.com have event series with Bank of America. What does Bank of America do? They invest in the pipelines. You have Vox doing the explainers and Ezra Klein. That's wicked smart man. Their podcast that I once painfully listened to was sponsored by Goldman Sachs. I mean, the list goes on and on. Rachel Maddow, that liberal bastion. You could watch her on MSNBC if you're on a full stomach, definitely. And you'll get oil and fossil fuel commercials.
Or perhaps a commercial for just Hillary's book, but I digress.
Right. And it goes on and on. It goes on and on. I mean, at Morning Joe once I watched, and they said, this segment's brought to you by Wells Fargo. I mean, how are you supposed to be media when you are literally in bed with fossil fuel companies and banks? And by the way, I'm not demonizing. I have a few friends that work in banking. I shit on them all the time.
That's true,
but all of these banks, not all, because some have been divesting, but many of the banks are invested in Dakota Access Pipeline, Keystone XL Pipeline, Bayou Bridge Pipeline. I could go on and on. Very dangerous things that are contributing to our global warming and climate change. And by the way, I made this point during CNN and MSNBC's coverage of Hurricane Florence, which seemed like they were a little disappointed.
Yeah, they were.
They sent out the army. Chris Cuomo was there. Chris Cuomo, Anderson Cooper, and all of them went out because they thought it was going to be like a Category 4 and 5, and then they were a little worried. I'm not minimizing it because it was definitely a big storm.
But they wanted to capitalize on it,
right?
Which is gross.
But they're interviewing the heads of energy companies who are there talking about power going out and electricity going out. Do they not find it ironic that they're interviewing the head of energy companies in Virginia and North Carolina who also own the very fracking and fossil fuel projects that are contributing to climate change? And the climate change is contributing to, dare I say it, extreme weather and hurricanes.
Yeah.
None of them even think about this because either they're too stupid or they're too happy lying in their beds filled with Benjamins at night. But they're interviewing heads of energy companies that are literally behind the pipelines, the fracking, and all of these things that are contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions, to the warming of the planet that is causing more and more Category 3, Category 4, Category 5 storms. Trump said one thing that was correct. Puerto Rico got hit by 2 hurricanes in a span of 2 weeks. That kind of things don't happen 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
You want to say something?
No, I agree.
So definitely read the fine print because, by the way, not only do these MIT, Harvard studies go out there from MIT and Harvard, but then their articles after articles are written by Huffington Post, by journalists, by Politico, by Vox.
Yeah, when you see the name Harvard or a Stanford study, everyone, I think even people who are really, really look into things are like, oh, that's fine. I can totally trust that because it's Harvard, because it's Stanford, because it's Berkeley. And so we can't trust, well, really anything. We can trust status quo, though. We
can. And as a reminder, all of this, the crown, the GoFundMe, is to launch Status Quo, the website. When would you say the website's going to launch?
To be determined, but the start of next month to the middle-ish, depending on certain things that are exciting things.
Yes, and you'll understand why we waited to launch the website when a certain story we're working on publishes. We've been waiting for a reason.
Yeah, and we know you guys are tired of not seeing it, and believe us, we're tired of you not seeing it too.
Yes.
We want you to see it so bad.
Yes, and definitely share this on Facebook. It's incredible. I have 20,700 likes on Facebook, yet I have 10 viewers at a time.
And I shared it to a bunch of groups.
And I love my 10 and 11 viewers on Facebook, but
Yay.
We should have more. So, Colin Tooley, one of our video editors, I'm excited. Yes.
Colin's the very best in the whole world.
What's our next story?
Our next story actually ties into climate change. And this is actually close to where I live. I live in Maryland, and this is the Chesapeake region. So Deal Island and other islands like Smith Island, they're literally sinking. And if you guys don't know anything about Maryland, it's a very fishing, crabbing, watery sort of place. People really built the industry around being watermen. But these islands are sinking into nothing. They're going away because of climate change. And so this is actually an NBC News piece about Deal Island, which again is sinking due to climate change. So they say that the bay water around around Deal Island and others could grow 2 feet by 2050 and another 3 feet or more by, how would you even say that, 2100 models predict. And so at that point, Deal Island would literally disappear. And these aren't heavily populated islands at all. A lot of people have moved away, the culture has changed, but what's interesting about these islands is that they're extremely conservative. They even have like British accents, essentially, because they're so isolated, at least on Smith Island. I'm not sure about Deal. But they don't want to move away. They don't believe in climate change. Often they're very Trump fans. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic where the scientists go in and study this stuff and try to come up with plans and figure things out to save this island. And they don't realize that the very people, the people who live on the islands, they don't realize the people they're cheering for are the reason their beautiful islands are going away. So, yeah, so someone was quoted here in this article as saying, for residents, the time to defend their home is now. So those denying that this is happening, the time is now. Unlike in other natural disasters like hurricanes that ravaged Houston and Puerto Rico this year, forcing families to act out of desperation, the residents on Deal Island and others are preparing for the impending loss by building physical barriers. So those are one of the things that they're trying to do, but it's like bailing out a boat with a tiny little bucket that has a bunch of holes in it, It just doesn't work. And so over the past 5 years, an outline has taken shape to try to save this island, and it has about 1,000 residents. But they're not sure what to do because they have to educate the people who live there. They have to battle something that seems right now to be unwinnable, which is really, really sad.
Cheryl says same thing is happening on Easter Island, which has prisoners on the island.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the hope is to preserve Deal just as other coastal communities are weighing their own future. It ends by talking about predicting how sea levels will change is not guaranteed, but scientific models through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers show that even in a best case situation, waters in the Chesapeake are set to continue rising another 1 to 2 feet by the year 2100 and could top as much as 5.5 feet. I can't even imagine that for not just that area, but just how devastating the weather could get and how everything would just be decimated. So yeah, I don't know what you make of that, about these tiny communities, but also the big communities. We have all these hurricanes coming. There are so many signs, and yet people still don't believe it. It
goes to the same thing that I said when I was at the Young Turks, and it goes to the same thing that I'm saying now. There's a war on the poor. It's not a coincidence that most of these dangerous things are happening where poor people live or in communities that don't have a lot of people. Reminder of Standing Rock. Standing Rock, the pipeline, Dakota Access Pipeline, was originally supposed to go through Bismarck, much higher population, and 97% white. And they rerouted that thing so quickly, your head can spin, borrowing from my friend Donald Trump. Kidding. So to, a lower population and indigenous people. And now you're seeing in smaller communities that don't know any better, them doing these kinds of things. That's why it's so important. I'm not trying to toot our own horn here, but you really, really need to get coverage of these things. You need to get media attention on these things, bodies on the ground, interviewing residents, because I promise you a lot of times when I go out into places, half the residents don't even know these things are happening.